Hello and well met. Today we are bringing you our take on ship combat in space and on the seas. This is going to be specifically related because to the fact that Starfinder,
Spelljammer, he means, it's a little bit...
I do it every time.
You do. You love to get
every time.
Starfinder, Spelljammer confused.
Spelljammer has been released.
Yeah. And it's a little light on ship combat rules, as you may or may not have heard.
But thankfully, we have the other book that helps you
Ship combat.
Ship combat. You may say, why is your book upside down? And I will tell you it's because, thank you, Amazon, it was printed upside down.
It's a special printing.
Super... It might be worth millions.
But it's out of the box now, so it's probably, the value is halved. All right, so getting into it, the idea is that Ghost of Saltmarsh, right, has ship combat. It's a little bit much, we think, right?
It's very detailed.
Yeah.
So if that's how you're looking to play your game, there's some incredible stuff in here. If you really want that detailed combat where you can be calling shots, essentially, as you said.
Yeah, all the different parts of the ships you can hit, all the different crews and the particular thresholds and everything, all the different weapons. Mm-hmm. It's going to give you an awesome naval adventure. If you want something that your players can really sink their teeth into mechanically with lots of rules. But
that's this.
That's one half. And the other half is, of course, the Spelljammer,
which is about one page.
One page. That's being very generous. Here's the Spelljamming, quote-unquote, the combat area, page, I want to say, 24 and 25. And here, really, it's just
mostly crashing.
Very rules light. And there's one page just on crashing, which they could have used to accentuate to other parts. And we'll have a review on Spelljammer up as well. So we think this is a little rules light. Now, Kyle mentioned Starfinder earlier. Perhaps you've played the Pathfinder variant of Starfinder. If you think this guy is complicated, Starfinder, you need to be an Excel spreadsheet expert to go through that combat, because it's like there's a science officer and there's this person. They all take turns, but then it's not at the same time because then the enemies go, and so the science officer buffs the captain buffs the pilot, and it's too much. So
I'm gonna nix that. We like snappy combat.
We do, and to make sure all the players are involved.
Yeah, and we think that makes it a better experience, not only for the players, but also for all of you who are viewers.
Because we are doing Delvequa, Tides of Chaos.
Yes, and so that was another reason that we wanted to bring this up, because this is how we are going to be running ship combat
in our campaigns.
Yeah. And it's kind of a combination of the two mixed in with some great stuff that you came up with.
Yeah, so we're going to give you our take on the ship combat rules. As Kyle said, from sea to shining sea, from the sea of stars to the sea of what? H2O.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into this. So first things first.
Phases. So we have decided to break it down into two phases. We initially talked about it being 3. You can always do that. But we think that there should be a ship combat phase, which can include the chase leading up to that, and then a boarding phase. This is in line with what Spelljammer has. It's somewhat in line with what Ghost of Saltmarsh has.
But it's been reduced.
Yes. So the ship combat phase is going to be when you're firing on one ship, from one ship to another ship. That can either be using ballistas and other sorts of
manned weaponry.
Siege weaponry, or using your ranged spells, cantrips, etc.
Yeah, or if you have your own guns or firearms, or so you want to throw a spear at the other ship, whatever your range is. So ship combat phase is everything to do with two ships side by side, broadsiding each other, or just you're trying to take the enemy ship down or get it weak enough, or immobilized enough so you can board it if you want to loot it, or take everybody down, or just destroy it outright, whatever you'd like to do.
So the thing that Ghosts of Saltmarsh has that is simplified here in Spelljammer, which we do like, is so both have damage thresholds, and how a damage threshold works is that essentially a ship or a piece of your ship, depending on which variation you want to go with, has a number of hit points, and then it has a damage threshold.
Here's an example of the Bombard in Spelljammer. Hopefully you can see it okay. You see it has a damage threshold of 20, and it's a hit point value, whole value of 300. So what's that do? What's the threshold?
So basically the threshold means that if it has a 20 damage threshold, if you do 20 damage or more, you hit the ship's hit points. Like that 20 plus damage comes off of the ship's hit points. But if you hit less than that, if you hit 19, 18, 17, 15, anything below that, it is ineffective damage. Okay. It does not do damage to the ship.
Okay, so that's
and I
saying
think
the
that
same.
that is good. You can, there are statistics in here. You can scale a ship from having anywhere between 10 to 20 or higher.
Depending on how beefy of a ship it is, right?
Correct.
If it's a small, chug boat or, a sailboat for a fisherman, for example, when they have a damage threshold of 5 or 10, a light vessel, something between, we've noticed between the books. If it's a regular, a medium-sized vessel, let's say, when it comes to ships, probably like 15, it's a big, heavy, thick boat or whatever. It's gonna, or Spelljammer, it'll have like a 20 threshold.
About a 20.
And that seems to be between 10, 15, 20 seems to be what D&D, what Wizards has decided is going to be those thresholds.
And you can always do, you don't have to do those numbers. You can always do 12 or 13 or whatever you want to do. It's always up to the DM's discretion. But we do like this. For our campaign, we're going to go with a uniform damage threshold across the entire ship. So rather than calling shots, which is how Ghost of Saltmarsh has it.
And by calling shots, he means that you can target, for example, the oars, or the sails, or the ballistas,
or the helm
of the other ships. Now, I think it requires a lot of, I think on the side of the players, right, they need to visualize that, they need to make sure where they're firing. I think it's going to be a lot of like decision paralysis, trying to figure out, okay, what's the best course of action here, what should I be firing? And they're like, Captain, what do I do?
And also for the DM to track, it's a lot to track because you're tracking also...
Oh, wow, especially if there's more than one ship, for example.
Yes.
It's insane.
So much. And so this is... So we like the idea of having one damage threshold and one hit point pool for an entire ship.
Yes. I like the unified aspect. I personally like the unified aspect of Spelljammer, but I'm more like a rules... I like the crunch personally, but when it comes to everyone at the table, I like it to be more light, rules light.
However, we think that this is a little, just having a damage threshold takes away a little bit of the fun. So we're adding in this new mechanic. Well, it's not a new mechanic. It's a mechanic as old as time. We're adding exhaustion rules into the ship's damage.
Right.
And this exhaustion is going to be affecting, these levels of exhaustion are going to be affecting not only the ship, but also the players on the ship. And this is really key because we feel like with a lot of these ship, when you're doing ship or mech or whatever combat, it can feel like one person's sort of the captain and then nobody else, everybody's either just like firing ballistas. But by doing this, it makes it a much more visceral thing so that as stuff is flying through the air and planks are being, splintered and we're in this very visceral combat, just as the ship is taking blows and careening side to side and all these things, this is also affecting the players, of course.
Yeah.
And so that was really your idea to bring that into the equation. And so that's what we want to talk about.
We wanted to keep all the systems as much as we could in line with D&D, right?
With
so there's a system here that's already built in, right? So let's, instead of just taking that for people or players, we're going to put that onto this inanimate object which is the boat.
As well.
Yeah, so you don't think of it, not necessarily exhaustion, it could just be like I'm not sure, like a boat fatigue or
boat fatigue,
a boat, and also a boat threshold. I don't want to use threshold again. I don't know. We have this written all here
in my great handwriting,
and what we'd like to make a document. We'll put it down in the comments in the description and let you peruse that too. But going down the exhaustion rules, which you may already know from playing 5th edition, but how they'll affect a ship. So you want to start,
So this is going to be based off of. We're going to go by 20 increments of 20%. So this will be a percentage of the ship's hit points based off of the ship's hit points.
So the ship has, for example, 100 hit points. The first threshold will be reached at 80 hit points.
So for all intents and purposes, we're going to assume the ship has 100 hit points to explain this. So if you lose 20 hit points, 20%, your ship is going to be at 80%, and the ship is going to have disadvantage for not only the ship, but also the crew on all ability checks. And that makes sense. You've taken on some damage, maybe you're rocking, it's a little bit crazy, like the combat's starting to begin, you're a little flustered. Having people be at disadvantage for ability checks, I think makes sense, just as it makes sense for the ship.
Sure, the shrapnel coming at you, that some planks are broken, the side of the ship, maybe the railing is busted out, so if you're getting shot and you're trying to dodge away, and someone from the other ship fires whatever requires a deck save. They fire a fireball, whatever it is. Well, it's going to be harder for you to get out of the way of it when there's like 5 planks around you that are missing.
The debris, because it essentially makes the ship difficult terrain.
Or like a dead body suddenly flies onto you or whatever. So there it is. So at that point, at 80%, everybody's part of this, right? You're all the crew. It's not just the pilot that's affected, right, or the ship itself. So yeah, here you got the first level of exhaustion, just like you find in the rules of D&D. That's what it is.
So do you want to take 60%?
Sure. 60%. The speed of the ship and the crew on it is halved. At this point, the ship has taken so much structural damage, it's not easy to walk around it, right?
Yes.
And also, it's not easy for the ship to continue sailing at a maximum speed. So at this point, you can imagine like the sails are shredded, right? Maybe whatever the starship, if you're on the Spelljammer helm has taken some damage or whatever. So the ship is rocking or it's taking on some water. At the same time, this is all happening, right? The ship is in distress, as are the crew as well. So their speed is halved as well.
And I think that makes
60%. So at this point, again, imagine a 100 hit point ship. The ship has taken about 40 points of damage. It's at 60 hit points remaining. That's 60%.
Correct. So, and then when we get to 40%, so the ship only has 40 hit points left. It's taken 60 points of damage. We're going to have disadvantage for the crew on the ship and the ship as it pertains to attacks and saving throws. This is right in line with the exhaustion rules. And I think, again, it stacks. It makes sense. If the ship is in that much damage, you've experienced that this vessel could be partially sinking. You could have part of the helm up in the air, Titanic style. I mean, you're in such difficult terrain. You've taken potentially some damage yourself from all of this debris, that you are at disadvantage to your own attack rolls. So
you're trying to man the ballista, right? But at this point, the ballista could even beat off its base, So you're trying to fire it off, or you're trying to fire this cannon, right? But all the cannonballs have rolled off to the other side of the ship, so someone's having to retrieve them and throw them on,
Exactly.
So that's the point where everything's kind of getting, for your side and the other side, it's getting a little more difficult. So
yeah, 100%.
All right. Do you want me to do the next one?
Yeah, do 20%.
Okay, sure, 20%. So this is a little challenging because the point that you see here in exhaustion is that your maximum hit point is halved, right?
Correct.
For a ship, that makes sense because if you think about it, at this point you've taken so much damage structurally that even if you were, for example, the combat's over, right? The ship, one of the masts is totally down. You could do what you can to mend it, but unless you go to like a dock or a port, you're never going to get that thing back up to 100%.
Yeah, it is. The ship is disabled until it can have docked care.
And now, what happens to the players? Well, we decided that I think that just having the players lose their maximum hit points is probably too much, but I think along the same lines, just have the players take their half of their maximum hit points in damage. So if a player has 80 hit points, at this point, they would just receive 40 hit points of damage from taking residual blows or shrapnel from everything that's been going on.
Yeah, things, bullets and cannonballs grazing you, all of these things. So it's not that you take that 50%. I think that's great.
Or you could, if you want to just stagger those across the way, or not even incorporate for players. Either way, I think there's a way to do it.
And that allows your players to, while this ship is going down, have this real connection, this visceral connection to the ship, because it's physically affecting their well-being too.
Yes.
And that would be how it would be.
Because in D&D, it's usually max hit points, 0 hit points, and there's no difference, right?
Yeah.
It's your scratch or whatever. But here, you're actually, again, this ship here, this flying fish ship, has 250 hit points, right? But what's it matter if they're 200 or 20 or 80? Nothing. Your ship's completely fine unless it gets down to 0.
Exactly.
So yeah, we decided to make that a little more, like you said, it's going to affect the players and the ship.
Yes. And then 0%, you have your speed is reduced to zero. So this is more specifically towards the ship, but here's how it affects the players. Just as you would take a death save when you're at 0 hit points, the ship is going to be taking death saves to see if it sinks or not.
Right.
So I think that is really, really clever.
Yeah.
Because then it's like, oh, well, now, we're floating in the middle of the
Are you able to patch it up, or is water going to keep pouring in there? And I think that saves this interesting mechanic that we're applying here for the ship. Will the ship die, or will it live? And again, just like in real actual D&D combat, if the other ship were to continue to fire at that ship because they're assholes, they just want to make sure it's fully destroyed, then for every hit, they take a death save automatically.
Exactly.
Or they lose a death. They
Yes.
take
yes.
okay. So that's it. So we've gone through damage thresholds, hit points. So everything you see, for example, here is going to stay the same. You have your damage threshold, you have your hit points the same. We're adding those quote unquote exhaustion rules, which we got to find a better name for that.
Yeah, we do.
If you have a good name for that,
put it down in the
comments, please.
And if you think that you could, if you have a better idea of how to tweak this a little bit, leave it in the comments down below. We're more than willing to adapt. We love learning from other people. We definitely haven't, pulled inspiration from various parts of the internet. So I think this is going to be really fun for our players. And I think it's going to be really fun for players at your table and to run, because it's something that is easy to track,
but it's also involved enough.
It's very involved.
And a lot of role play.
High stakes.
Yeah, a lot of role play and a lot of drama for your DM to dictate and your players to react to. So there's a couple more things we're going to talk about too. We're still in the ship combat phase, which is really just a ship combat, and then is group initiative. So
I think this works really well.
It worked really well for old D&D did it, right? I think like D&D Basic 2nd Edition was you roll a D6, the highest side goes first. Everyone goes first. It just keeps it orderly and easy, and it's just imagine like this ship's broadside firing against that ship, and then that ship's broadside firing against this ship, right? Just like that.
I think that group initiative works really well, and it also helps keep it nice and snappy.
Yeah.
Now, when you're in the boarding phase, then you would switch into a single initiative.
Right. We'll get to that in just a moment. Yeah. So in this case, the group initiative is what in the Dungeon Master's Guide is called the side initiative. So each side rolls, the highest side will go first. Correct. Right. So as we get to the last part of this, which is going to be weaponry on the ship. Now in Spelljammer, it's not very well dictated when you're doing combat and when in the distance and like how many people.
And then it's very detailed in Ghosts of Saltmarsh.
It's a little overly detailed. So
how many people need to man each thing and everything, and that's fine. That's fine. I think you can use those as a baseline. Always up to the DM's discretion, but we're writing this in as such. You can fire a siege weapon at the DM's discretion by yourself, but you're going to take disadvantage or double disadvantage depending on the size of it, depending on the situation. Right. Automatically if you're doing it by yourself.
So imagine like a ballista is usually 3 to crew, right? So maybe your DM thinks it's a you just got this ship, right? And there's only 4 or 6 players, and there's not enough. There's too many weapons, or somebody else wants to do something else in another different part of the ship, and so you're kind of left manning this ballista. Well, okay, maybe your DM's like, I'll let you do that, but having to crank it yourself or having to turn it yourself, well, that's going to involve a lot of action where you're not going to be very accurate. So at that point, you can do it, but at disadvantage. So basically, I think the point of this rule is you or another player or a couple players or 3 can try to man a weapon for less than its crew value, right? So if it's 3, you can try to crew it with 2 or 1 at disadvantage at the DM's discretion.
Correct. And what this does is it, if you assume, again, any campaign can start, however you could start a campaign and you have a crew of 40. But for our situation, we have a very small crew. We've only got 4 people on board. So what we're going to do is by doing this group initiative, by doing the siege weapon stuff, we're going to be incentivizing the players to use their spells still, use their abilities in that combat, even if it's at a range. Yeah. Because, the siege weapon might be more likely to get to the threshold, but if you got disadvantage, you might not even hit. So that's a cool way to sort of, I think, incorporate all those rules, make it easy to bookkeep, very involved, very visceral.
And in regards to the weapons, even a small crew can now be effective or at least do something on a ship if they're attacked, right? If they're thinking, okay, well, this ballista has a crew of 3, there's no way we can possibly do anything, there's only 2 of us here. No. You just do it. You're going to be a little slower at it. Get in there, fire that damn ballista, and get the hell out of there, right?
Until you can accrue a crew.
Oh! Bam, 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 air horn. Okay.
And then one more thing in terms of ship combat and your goals. You can have different goals. So your goal could be to destroy a vessel outright, and that could result in loss of loot. Or you could choose to try to immobilize a vessel and then board it. So
and that's phase 2, which is the boarding phase.
Yes.
And that's kind of how they show it in Spelljammer a little bit. And so it depends on what your objective is. So if and when you get to the boarding phase, which is always pretty cool, right? Pirates of the Caribbean. The ship here in Spelljammer, I agree with these. So they're within 5 feet of each other. The pilot of the ship can maneuver alongside safely, enabling most creatures to move safely from one ship to another, right? Sure. And you see that all the time. It's plenty feasible in fantasy fiction.
And it also ties into this because there would be potentially ability checks to get from one ship to the other. And so if the ship is already damaged or one of the ships, it could be harder for you to get onto it safely.
Yeah.
So I really like how that ties it all together. I think it adds that element that both of these books are missing.
Yeah. And I to me, it's like goes to Saltmarsh, having all the different weapon spots and the different ACs and the different hardness values or whatever it is. It's a lot.
Yeah.
As in, I could easily do it. I've been playing D&D for 25 years, so and I would love to do it. But I think for having a 5th edition is right, and rightly so, is made in a way where it's gonna be fast and effective to get into combat and to have everybody engaged. I think this is a way to do it. Just kind of taper
100%.
it down, make it a little more rules light, but still fun and roleplay heavy. So boarding.
Single initiative. That's the
once you're on board, I think I would start the single initiative as in everybody rolls initiative, including the other crew, and highest to lowest and so forth. At that point, the ship becomes almost like either a battle map or even its own dungeon, right? If you have
if it's a very large ship, of course, yeah.
Yeah. So at that point, everyone knows how to do combat, so we're not going to go too much on boarding. I don't know if it necessarily mix boarding and ship combat. I think once you're in the boarding phase, you're kind of in the boarding phase.
I think so too.
And then maybe if you decide to leave, then start ship combat again or whatever, which makes the side initiative better because it's just re-rolling one die. So yeah, I think that's kind of long and short.
Yeah, that's the long and short of it. We might have some additions or some cuts as we get the opportunity to actually do it in practice, but we think that this is going to be. I mean, I'm so excited about this. I've been kind of racking my brain for a couple months trying to figure out what is the what to take, what to leave. Yeah. And we just kind of sat down and I think that this is the best of both worlds. And I think that you can apply this to Spelljammer. You can apply this to any ship combat. It's that's just on the sea. And I think it's a really it's a good system. So
I think
let us know what you think. If you like it, if you hate it, we're happy to discuss it. So
I think it's a fun take, and if you get some comments in early, well, maybe we can incorporate those changes
absolutely
into Delphqua. Tides of Chaos, our campaign here at Green and Garb. So that's it.
I think if you can just if you like what we're doing here, please remember to smite that like button. Subscribe, leave a comment down below, ring the notification bell. All of that helps us stay engaged with you.
We're almost at 1,000. Well, we're getting to 1,000 subscribers.
We're getting close.
Yeah, we're so excited.
So,
live, love, life, D&D.
100%.
Okay, well, thanks for watching. This has been Space and Sea and Ship Adventures now with better rules? ? Yeah. All right, see you next time.